The power meter, a silent sentinel of my meticulously crafted grid, spun backwards. A serene, quiet victory. Then, a thick black cable, buried in the dark, snaked across the fence line. A laugh, sharp and entitled, echoes, "It's free power, right?" But I knew the price, and soon, so would she. The quiet hum of the inverters was Alex's favorite soundtrack. It was the sound of self-sufficiency, of a meticulously planned dream brought to life. He had poured every spare cent, every ounce of his engineer's obsession, into his solar array. The sleek black panels stretching across the south-facing slope of his roof were more than just technology. They were a monument to his belief that hard work and foresight could insulate you from the chaos of the world. He was a man of data and systems, and the data from his Enphase monitoring app was his Bible. For months, the numbers had been a symphony of green and gold. Energy generated, energy consumed, excess sent back to the grid for a healthy credit. But lately, the symphony had a dissonant note, a subtle, almost imperceptible drop in his net export. At first, he dismissed it as seasonal variation. Clouds, a dirty panel, a slight dip in efficiency. But the numbers didn't lie. The discrepancy grew day by day until it was a screaming anomaly. His blood ran cold as he pulled up the live power consumption graph. His home's usage was stable, predictable. The solar production was excellent, peaking exactly as it should under the clear, midday sun. Yet the energy flowing back to the utility was consistently lower than it should have been. It was like watching water drain from a bathtub faster than the faucet could fill it, even though the drain was supposedly closed. There was only one logical conclusion. Someone, somewhere, was siphoning off his excess power. He knew exactly who. Karen, his next-door neighbor, was a whirlwind of entitlement wrapped in floral-patterned athleisure. She had lived next to him for a year, and in that time she had managed to borrow his lawnmower and return it with a broken wheel, host a series of late-night karaoke parties that vibrated his walls, and constantly, relentlessly inquire about his solar system. "You're like, off the grid, right?" she'd asked one day, leaning over the fence as he weeded his garden. "Free power. Must be nice." He'd patiently explained the concept of net metering, the investment, the utility credits. "It's not free, Karen. It's an investment that pays for itself over time." She just waved a hand dismissively. Yeah, it's a lot of tech mumbo-jumbo, but you get all the sun and you're not paying the man, so it's basically free." He hadn't thought much of it then. Now her words felt like a punch to the gut. The casual dismissal, the effortless arrogance. The hunt was meticulous. Alex started by checking his own system, crawling into the sweltering attic, verifying every connection, every fuse, every wire. The system was pristine. No faults. The problem wasn't internal. He then walked the perimeter of his house, his eyes, scanning every inch of the foundation, the fence line, the garage, and there it was, tucked away behind a sprawling honeysuckle bush, where the fence met his garage wall, was a faint, almost invisible trench. A dark, thick cable, the kind used for heavy-duty outdoor applications, emerged from the ground, snaked under his chain-link fence, and burrowed back into the dirt on the other side. A gut-wrenching, sick certainty flooded his veins. He followed the line with his eyes, a grim tracker, until it disappeared into the back of Karen's unkempt garage. The garage door was open, and he could see a tangle of extension cords and power tools, all plugged into a single junction box where the black cable terminated. He took a series of photos with his phone, his hands shaking not with anger, but with a cold, bone-deep sense of violation. This wasn't just theft. It was a complete and utter disregard for his property, his investment, his hard work. With the evidence in hand, he strode over to Karen's front door and knocked. A minute later, she opened it, a half-eaten bag of chips in her hand. Her eyes were bright with a fleeting smile that soured the moment she saw his grim face. "Oh, hey, Alex, what's up? Lost your phone? Karen?" he began, his voice dangerously low. "We need to talk about my solar panels." She rolled her eyes, her hand still holding the chip bag. "Again? I told you it's not my thing. Is something broken? Is that what all the beeping was a few weeks ago?" "No, nothing's broken. I found something. Right here." He pulled up the photo of the cable on his phone and held it out. Her face went from bored to confused to a mask of practiced innocence. "What is that?" "It's a power cable. It's a very thick one, Karen. It runs from my house under our shared fence and into your garage." That's impossible. Why would it?" "Because you're stealing my electricity." He said the words and they felt heavy, final. The mask of innocence dropped, replaced by a scoff of pure, unadulterated indignation. "Stealing? Are you serious? It's solar power. It's from the sun. You're not losing anything." "I am losing something," he said, his voice rising in volume for the first time. "I'm losing the credit I earn for the excess power I generate. I paid for every single panel, every single inverter, every single permit. This is my property, my investment, and you've decided to just tap into it like a fire hydrant." She laughed. A short, sharp, disbelieving laugh. "You're seriously coming to my door to complain about a few dollars? You have a whole solar array. The sun is shining. It's not like I'm getting a bill. It's free. I thought we were friends, Alex. You're so petty." His rage finally broke through the cool exterior. "Petty? You invaded my property. You ran a live electrical wire under a fence. You think this is a game? This is theft, Karen, and it has consequences." She put her hands on her hips, her eyes narrowing. "Or what? You'll call the cops? Go ahead. They'll laugh you out of the station. My neighbor is stealing my son." Pathetic. Just disconnect the thing if it's such a big deal. Honestly, what's a guy like you going to do? She shrugged, turning to go back. Inside. "The sun is for everyone. It's not yours to hoard." The garage door started to close, the insult a sharp finality. But Alex didn't leave. He stood there for a long moment, the heat of the afternoon sun on his face, a different kind of heat building inside him. The anger, the shock, the righteous, indignation. It all crystallized into a single terrifyingly calm thought. She thought solar was free. She thought she was untouchable. He wasn't going to call the cops. The police would make it a small claims issue, a civil spat over a few $100. It would be an annoying, drawn-out process that would never give him back the sense of security and ownership she had so effortlessly stolen. No, she was right. What was a guy like him going to do? He was going to use the one thing she couldn't understand, his expertise, his mastery of the system. She had laughed at his tech mumbo-jumbo. Now, that mumbo-jumbo was going to be her undoing. He walked back to his side of the fence, the rage gone, replaced by a cold, calculating resolve. He didn't even look at the cable anymore. He didn't need to. He knew exactly what he was going to do. He went straight to his garage, a workshop filled with the tools of his trade. He ignored the fuse box, the wiring diagrams, the power meters. He went to a small, locked cabinet on the far wall. He opened it, revealing a custom-built, programmable logic controller he had built years ago for a personal project. He hadn't used it in ages, but its purpose now was crystal clear. It was a digital brain, a master switch, and he was about to give it a new mission. He took out his laptop, a USB cable, and a high-voltage relay switch. He was not going to cut her power. He was going to use her entitlement, her belief in free solar, as a weapon. He was going to let her continue to take what she thought was hers, to build her confidence and reliance on his system. And then, he would pull the rug out from under her in a way she could never have anticipated. He connected the wires, the soft clicking of the relay switch, the only sound in the quiet garage. The revenge wouldn't be instantaneous, or even immediately obvious. It would be a slow burn, a gradual escalation of a crisis that she would have no idea was coming. A masterpiece of engineering designed to leave her utterly and completely speechless. The garage was a sanctuary of logic and order, a stark contrast to the chaotic entitlement next door. The air, thick with the scent of solder and ozone, was a comfort to Alex. He worked with a surgeon's precision, his fingers nimble as they manipulated a tangle of wires. The programmable logic controller, a beige metal box from a forgotten project, sat on his workbench like a sleeping predator. He had planned this, not out of malice, but out of a cold, rational need for justice. Karen had laughed at his tech. Mumbo-jumbo. Now, he was going to make her feel the full weight of its silent, invisible power. His plan wasn't about brute force. It was an elegant solution to a crude problem. He wasn't going to just cut her power. That would be too simple, too easy. That would be an act of direct conflict, and he was an engineer, not a brawler. His revenge would be a system failure, a cascading series of electrical anomalies that would seem random, unexplainable, and entirely her fault. He was going to turn her own reliance against her. He was going to teach her the difference between free and stolen. He meticulously wired the relay switch to a small terminal block he'd installed under the fence line, a subtle modification to the stolen circuit. The relay was the key. He would control when and for how long the power flowed. With a few lines of code on his laptop, he set the parameters, a series of randomized micro-interruptions that would be too fast to trip a circuit breaker, but long enough to cause a surge, a brownout, a glitch. The kind of tiny phantom electrical problems that would slowly, inexorably, drive a person insane. Meanwhile, next door, Karen was living her best life. The sun in her mind was her personal ATM. She had no idea her power consumption was a ticking time bomb on Alex's monitoring app. She had been smug after their confrontation, convinced she had won. He was a petty, neurotic man who cared more about his numbers than being a good neighbor. She had a grand plan, an outdoor movie night, a projector, a massive sound system, all powered by the sun, of course. She'd even bragged to her friends about it on a group chat, calling Alex Solar Man and laughing about his silly outrage. She went to the home improvement store and bought a second, more powerful extension. Cord, a thicker one, to daisy-chain to the first. She even bought a small outdoor refrigerator for drinks, a portable freezer for ice, and a pop-up popcorn machine. She was going all out. The more she took, the more she felt she was getting away with it, and the more she felt she was winning. The feeling was intoxicating. She had a new mantra. Why pay for something you could get for free? As evening approached, she began to set up. The projector screen was hung from the side of her house. The speakers were positioned for maximum bass. The popcorn machine was plugged in, its motor humming as it heated up. She took a selfie and captioned it, "Movie night on solar power, yung eco queen dabber free power." Across the fence, Alex watched the lights flicker on and the sounds of her preparations drift over. He saw her pride, her smugness, her complete lack of remorse. The rage he'd felt earlier had been replaced by a cold, surgical calm. He typed a final command into his laptop and hit enter. The screen glowed with a single line of text. System. Engaged. Let the lesson begin. The first sign was subtle. The popcorn machine sputtered. It didn't stop, but the motor whined slightly, the kernels popping a little slower than they should have. Karen barely noticed. She was too busy connecting the massive speaker system. She played a song on her phone and the bass kicked in, a low, thrumming beat that vibrated the ground. The sound was incredible. She felt a rush of satisfaction. This was her victory lap. A minute later, the song cut out abruptly, followed by a loud pop from one of the speakers. The music resumed, but with a crackle. "What was that?" her friend on the phone asked. "Probably the Wi-Fi," Karen said, shrugging it off. "It's always flaky." But the pops and crackles didn't stop. They came every few minutes, sometimes a little longer, sometimes shorter. The projector screen, which had been a crisp, clear image, started to show a slight ripple, a faint shimmer that was almost imperceptible unless you were looking for it. The popcorn machine, which had recovered, sputtered again and then went completely silent. The kernels sat there, unpopped. This thing is a piece of junk," she muttered, unplugging it and plugging it back in. It started up again, but the motor sounded strained. The next day, the problems escalated. Her brand-new smoothie blender, which had a reputation for power and speed, began to act strangely. The blades would whir for a second, then stop, then start again. It took her 3 attempts to get it to blend a simple banana smoothie, and when she did, the motor smelled faintly of burnt plastic. She went on a rant to her friends on a voice memo, her frustration mounting. "I swear the electricity in this neighborhood is a joke. My blender just died on me, and my sound system keeps cutting out. It's like a ghost in the wires." The ghost in the wires was Alex, sitting in his home office, a small smirk on his face as he monitored the power consumption graph on his laptop. The subtle randomized interruptions were working perfectly. He wasn't cutting her off. He was simply giving her just enough power to keep her going, but with a carefully calculated series of tiny, damaging failures. He could see her consumption spiking and then dropping dramatically as she unplugged her malfunctioning appliances. Karen's frustration turned to paranoia. She called the power company, complaining about voltage drops. The representative, after checking her account, told her everything looked normal on their end. "Are you running any new appliances, ma'am? Or perhaps a long extension cord?" Karen's heart hammered in her chest. She lied, claiming it was just her normal, everyday electronics. The power company technician told her to check her own breakers and call an electrician if the problem persisted. That night, she decided to try her movie night again. She'd managed to get a little bit of popcorn to pop by using her microwave. Instead, the projector came to life, but after 10 minutes, the screen went black. Not completely off, but just dark. The audio still worked, but the image was gone. She unplugged it and plugged it back in. Nothing. The bulb, which should have had a life of thousands of hours, was dead, popped, a victim of the subtle, engineered surges. That's when the anger and frustration fully collapsed into panic. She had spent a fortune on all this new gear. She went into her garage, her hand fumbling for the cable. She needed to disconnect it. This free power was costing her a fortune. But the cable was buried, and she couldn't find the end. She pulled at it, her hands dirtying from the soil, but it was too secure. A cold wave of despair washed over her. She was trapped by her own greed. She went back inside and sat down in the dark, the dead appliances surrounding her like a graveyard of her failed ambitions. She couldn't understand it. It wasn't a power outage, but everything was breaking. She looked at her phone and saw the Instagram photo she had posted, the one where she looked so smug and confident. Now, it felt like a mockery. She sat for a long time, the house eerily quiet, the only sound her own panicked breathing. She had to talk to someone. She had to ask for help. And there was only one person who knew anything about solar power and tech mumbo-jumbo. The next morning, Alex opened his front door to find Karen standing there. She was not the same person from their last confrontation. Gone was the floral athleisure and the smug smile. She wore a stained t-shirt, her hair was a mess, and her eyes were wide with a fear he hadn't seen before. She didn't start with a laugh or an insult. Her voice was small, almost a whisper. "Alex, something's wrong. With the power. I think it's broken." He looked at her, his face a mask of polite concern. "What do you mean, Karen? Is something wrong with your appliances?" She nodded quickly, a desperate plea in her eyes. "Everything. The blender, the projector, my stereo. It's all shorting out. The power keeps flickering. I don't know what's happening. And the power company says everything's fine, but it's not. It's like a curse." She looked at him. Truly looked at him, a flicker of genuine fear and respect in her gaze for the first time. "You're an expert in this stuff, right? You know what I'm talking about. Please, can you come look at my house? Can you help me?" Alex's mouth twitched, almost imperceptibly. He looked at her, at the desperation in her eyes, at the ruin of her stolen dream. He had her. The game was over. He could end it right now. But a new thought, colder and more calculating than before, entered his mind. She didn't just need help. She needed a real, lasting lesson. He was going to give it to her. He was going to turn this moment, this plea for help, into a final, devastating blow. He was going to offer her a solution, a way to fix her broken power, a solution that would truly leave her speechless. He took a slow breath, his gaze meeting hers, and a slow, cruel smile touched the corner of his lips. "Well, Karen," he said, his voice as calm and serene as the humming of his inverters, "I think I might have an idea of what's going on. But first, we need to sign some paperwork." Karen followed Alex into his immaculate minimalist home, the contrast between his sterile order and her own cluttered appliance graveyard of a house making her feel even more disheveled. The air was cool, smelling faintly of citrus and clean surfaces. Alex gestured to a chair at his kitchen island, a pristine white slab of quartz. On it lay a single, crisp manila folder. "Have a seat," he said, his voice calm, almost unnervingly so. He didn't offer her a drink or ask her how her night had been. He just stood there, waiting. "What is this?" she asked, her voice cracking as she eyed the folder. "The paperwork," he replied, sliding it across the counter towards her. She pulled out a multi-page document bound with a paperclip. The first page was a title sheet in bold, professional font: Solar Energy Service Agreement and Indemnification. She squinted, the large words blurring with her rising panic. "Service agreement? What are you talking about, Alex? I just need you to look at the wiring. Something's wrong. You know about all this stuff." She waved her hand vaguely toward his living room, as if to encompass his entire life. "Something is wrong, Karen," he said, and his voice took on the low, calm cadence of a professor lecturing a particularly dense student. "But it's not the wiring. It's the arrangement. You're using my excess power, which I generate and sell to the utility company for a credit. That's a service. Services have a cost." Karen's face, which had been pale with fear, flushed with a renewed anger. "A cost? This is blackmail! You're extorting me!" "Extortion is threatening someone to get something you don't deserve," Alex countered, his voice flat. "I deserve compensation for the power you've been stealing. The cost is all laid out in the agreement. I've been tracking your usage for weeks. The amount is substantial." He tapped the folder with a single, precise finger. "Take a look at Schedule A." She flipped through the pages with shaking hands until she found the table of numbers. Her eyes darted across the columns. Date, estimated usage, kWh, rate, kWh, total. The numbers swam. It was a formal spreadsheet, a forensic report of her theft. The rate he had charged was nearly double what the utility company charged, and at the bottom was a subtotal that made her stomach drop. "This is insane," she shrieked, slamming the folder down. "You can't do this! You don't have a business license! This isn't a legal document!" Alex leaned forward, resting his hands on the cool countertop. His eyes were cold, devoid of the emotion she had so easily provoked before. "It is entirely legal. This isn't a utility service, Karen. This is a private contract between two individuals. You are a trespasser on my property, and you have, for weeks, been siphoning a commodity that I own. I have photos of the cable, time-stamped from my security cameras. I have the data from my N-phase monitor, which tracks the precise amount of Energy that has been inexplicably diverted. I have a paper trail that would make any district attorney's mouth water. This agreement, however, is a non-criminal settlement. It allows you to avoid legal action and to get what you want, which, judging by the state of your appliances, is functional power. His words were like a physical blow. The certainty in his voice, the chilling mention of a district attorney, the time-stamped photos, it all hit her at once. She had thought this was a petty squabble. He had been building a case. But my appliances are all broken, she cried, her voice rising in a desperate plea. Your solar power is what did it. My solar power is a clean, regulated flow of electricity, Alex corrected calmly. My system is professionally installed and monitored. It is not my fault that your cheap electronics, which you illegally connected to a live wire, couldn't handle the surges. The damages are a separate matter. In fact, he said, pulling another document from the folder, I've included a second schedule, an indemnification clause. You will reimburse me for the cost of my time and labor in troubleshooting your issues, and you will agree to pay for any and all damages incurred from your unauthorized use of my grid. You're making this up, she screeched, her bravado finally shattering. You did something to the power. You're a liar. You did this on purpose. Alex's face was a stone wall. He didn't even flinch. I am an engineer, Karen. I believe in logical systems. You thought you could take without consequence. This is the consequence. The choice is simple. You can either sign this agreement and have your power restored, or you can face the consequences of your actions in court. The cost will be far higher there, I assure you. Not just in dollars, but in legal fees, punitive damages, and a criminal record. He took a breath, the silence in the room deafening. The choice is yours. He had her. She knew it. The triumphant smirk she'd worn on her front step just a week ago was a ghost of a memory. Her grand plan of free power was a smoking ruin of broken blenders and dead projectors. She looked at his face, at the cold finality in his eyes, and knew there was no way out. The humiliation was a hot, burning coal in her stomach. She took the pen he offered and, with a shaky hand, signed the documents. Her name looked small and insignificant on the page, dwarfed by the legal jargon and the astronomical numbers. When she finished, she handed it back to him. Now what? She asked, her voice a defeated whisper. Alex took the signed folder, his grip on it as firm as a handshake. Now, I turn your power back on. But let me show you something first. He walked over to his laptop, which was still open to the Enphase monitoring dashboard. He clicked a few times, bringing up a complex graph. He zoomed in on a small red spike of usage. This, he said, pointing to the line, is when you started using my power for your outdoor movie night. You thought it was a small amount, a drop in the bucket. But look. He pulled up a separate spreadsheet, one she hadn't seen. It was a detailed breakdown, not of her usage, but of his potential earnings. He had been planning to sell a large portion of his excess power back to the grid during the peak hours she had been stealing from him. The dollar amount he showed her for the credits he had lost was 3 times what he had charged her in the agreement. You've been paying for a fraction of what you actually owe me, he said, his voice quiet. And you thought you were winning. She stared at the screen, her mind reeling. The petty amount he was complaining about was a small fortune. She had no idea. The smug satisfaction she had felt, the triumph she had bragged about, it was all an illusion. She hadn't been clever, she had just been an easy mark. The truth, the full measure of her greed and ignorance, hit her with the force of a physical blow, leaving her utterly and completely speechless. The silence in Alex's kitchen was heavier than the air outside. Karen stared at the laptop screen, the numbers blurring, the reality of her debt a cold, hard knot in her stomach. She hadn't been clever. She hadn't been an eco-queen. She had been a thief who had just been caught by a meticulous, terrifyingly calm man who had turned her crime into a business transaction. Alex closed the laptop, the click of the latch sounding like the final period on a legal judgment. He slid the manila folder into a drawer and turned to face her. His expression was no longer one of cold resolve, but of detached professionalism. The game was over. Now it was time for the cleanup. "The signed agreement is a good start," he said, his voice as steady as the hum of his inverters. "But the indemnification clause requires you to remedy the physical trespass. The cable has to be disconnected and removed from my property. You can't leave live wiring on my land." Karen flinched. The words live wiring and my land were loaded with a fresh, terrifying weight. She thought of the little pops and crackles that had fried her brand-new projector, the faint smell of burnt plastic from her blender. He hadn't just been a petty neighbor. He had been playing with forces she couldn't comprehend. And he had let her think it was a game. But "I don't have the tools," she stammered, looking at her hands. They were clean, manicured nails, not hands meant for digging in the dirt. Alex went to a closet near the garage door and pulled out a pair of thick leather gloves and a small, pointed spade. He handed them to her. "These should suffice. The cable isn't buried deep." She took the tools, her hands shaking slightly as she pulled on the gloves. They were stiff and smelled of new leather. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She had imagined this confrontation ending with a tearful apology, a moment of mutual understanding, maybe even him forgiving her the debt. Instead, he was treating her like a contractor, a hired hand for her own punishment. He led her back outside to the side of his garage, to the small patch of disturbed earth where his manicured lawn met the chain-link fence. The honeysuckle bush, which had been her silent accomplice, now seemed to mock her with its sweet, cloying scent. "It runs about 5 feet into my property," Alex said, pointing with a long, unyielding finger. "Start digging. We need to sever the connection at the point where it enters my side of the fence. Then you can pull your end out." Humiliation was a tangible thing. It was the grit under her fingernails as she started to dig, the small, defeated sounds of the spade scraping against the hard-packed earth. Her back ached almost immediately. The sweat beaded on her forehead and ran down her temples, leaving a muddy streak in its wake. It was a physical manifestation of her crime, a punishment she couldn't simply swipe away with a credit card. "Alex," she said, her voice strained, I'm really sorry. I didn't know. I never thought about it like that." He watched her dig, his arms crossed over his chest. He didn't respond for a long moment, the only sound the scrape of metal on dirt. Finally, he spoke. "You knew what you were doing was wrong, Karen. You just didn't care. You were more concerned with getting something for nothing than with the consequences of your actions. Now you know. Every action has a reaction." His words hit her harder than the shovel. They were so cold, so clinical, so utterly devoid of the emotion she had expected. She had been so sure he was a hot-tempered, petty man. But he wasn't. He was a force of nature, a system of rules and consequences, and she had blundered into his world without a second thought. After 10 minutes of back-breaking labor, she hit something solid. It was the cable. She scraped the dirt away, revealing the thick black wire, its insulation surprisingly shiny and new, a final tangible symbol of her greed. Alex stepped forward, pulling out a pair of wire cutters from his back pocket. "That's good," he said. He didn't offer to cut it for her. He held the cutters out, silently. She had to do it, the final, decisive act. She took the cutters, their steel cold against her sweaty palms. She clamped them down on the cable and pushed. The shears strained, the metal groaning, and then with a final satisfying snap, the connection was severed. The wire fell away, two useless, blunt ends, one on her side of the fence, one on his. The metaphorical bridge of her entitlement had been physically broken. She stood up, her clothes stained with dirt, her face streaked with sweat, and looked at the severed cable in her hand. It was just a piece of wire now, a useless lump of plastic and metal, a monument to her folly. Alex walked back to his garage, leaving her standing there, defeated and alone. The sun, her supposed free source of power, shone down on her, bright and unforgiving. She looked at the severed cable and then back at her house, at the dead appliances and the mountain of debt she had just signed herself into. The laughter she had shared with her friends, the smug selfie she had posted, the casual dismissal of his property, it all came flooding back, a cascade of bitter, humiliating memories, and she knew in that moment that she was truly paying for her free power. The walk back to her house felt longer than a marathon. With each defeated step, the weight of the signed agreement and the muddy reality of the severed cable pressed down on Karen. The sun, which had been her golden ticket to a life of free, guiltless luxury, now felt like a spotlight on her humiliation. She slammed the front door behind her, plunging the house into a familiar, suffocating silence. The air was thick with the faint, acrid smell of burnt electronics, a ghost of her failed ambitions. She dropped the spade and gloves in a heap by the door, not caring about the trail of dirt they left on her white tile floor. Her phone buzzed, relentlessly from her pocket. The group chat she had so proudly boasted in was now a source of dread. Messages from friends flashed on the screen. Movie night starting soon? Popcorn machine ready? Are we still on for free solar power? She couldn't bring herself to answer. The lie was too big, the truth too bitter. She muted the chat and tossed the phone onto the couch, as if its very existence was a betrayal. She stood in the middle of her living room, a graveyard of her stolen dreams. The projector sat on a small table, a dark, lifeless cube. The massive speakers were silent, looming like angry sentinels. The popcorn machine, a monument to her greed, was a cold, inert lump of plastic. The financial debt Alex had levied on her was a heavy, invisible chain, but the mental cost of her arrogance was a sharp, unrelenting pain. A sharp, insistent ringing cut through the silence. The doorbell. Her heart hammered against her ribs. No, she couldn't. She wasn't ready to face anyone. She peeked through the blinds to see Sarah, a friend she had practically dragged into her scheme, standing on her porch with a bottle of wine and a bowl of salad. Karen's stomach churned. Sarah was the practical, logical one of the group, a woman who always paid her bills on time and never cut corners. Karen's mind raced. What could she say? The truth was not an option. A sick family member? A sudden illness? The lies felt flimsy, transparent, even to herself. She opened the door just a crack. Hey, Sarah, I'm so sorry, but movie night's off. I'm not feeling so well. Sarah's smile faltered. Her eyes scanned Karen's disheveled appearance, the streak of dirt on her cheek, the weary, haunted look in her eyes. Oh no, what's wrong? You look awful. I was so excited for your movie night. It was such a great idea. The words great idea felt like a punch to the gut. Karen's facade crumbled. It's just a headache. I think I'm going to turn in early. Sarah, ever the friend, pushed the door open gently. Nonsense. Let me help. I'll make you some tea and we can just relax. Don't worry about the movie. You're using that free solar power, right? It's all good. Karen's body tensed. No, Sarah, really, it's fine. I just need to be alone. Come on, Sarah said, stepping inside. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene. Whoa! What happened here? Is everything okay? She walked over to the sound system, a small, puzzled frown on her face. Why is it unplugged? It kept making this weird noise, Karen stammered, following her, her heart in her throat. "I think the cord is faulty." Sarah, without a word, bent down and plugged the extension cord into the speaker system. The light on the power strip flickered and died. Sarah's brow furrowed. "That's weird. Let me try the other plug." She moved the plug to a different outlet on the power strip. Nothing. A faint ozone smell wafted up from the power strip itself. Sarah said, picking up the power strip. "This thing feels hot, like it shorted out. What did you have plugged into it?" Karen's carefully constructed lie collapsed. She took a deep breath, and the whole story, a humiliating and tear-filled confession, spilled out. The neighbor, the solar panels, her belief in free power, the cable she ran across the fence, and finally, the back-breaking labor and the signed contract. She told it all. Sarah listened in stunned, growing disbelief. When Karen was done, the silence was absolute. Sarah put the power strip down on the table, a look of profound disappointment and shock on her face. "Karen, you stole from him? You really thought you could just take his power?" "But it was just a few hours here and there," Karen pleaded. "I didn't think it would be a big deal." "Of course it's a big deal. It's theft, Karen. And now you're in debt to him and your house is full of dead electronics. That's not karma. That's just a well-deserved consequence." Sarah shook her head, a sigh of frustration escaping her lips. "This is a mess. I'm going to try to at least get some lights on in here." She walked to the breaker box in the garage, a place Karen hadn't even thought to check. With a confident click, she flipped a switch. The lights flickered, a faint, sickly glow, and then went out again. Sarah tried another one. Same result. Frustration gave way to alarm. "Karen, what is wrong with your breakers? None of these are working." She tried a third and then a fourth. The lights in the garage gave a final, desperate flash. And then all the power in the house went out completely. A small, almost imperceptible plume of smoke curled from the breaker box. Sarah's eyes went wide. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Karen, you didn't just fry your appliances. I think your entire electrical system is fried." Karen's heart stopped. She stared at the smoking box, the reality of the situation finally, truly dawning on her. Her free power had come with a price, and she was just beginning to find out what it truly was. Her humiliation was now compounded by a cold, stomach-turning dread. The retribution she had just faced was nothing compared to the true catastrophic ruin that awaited her.